Good evening. We'd like to welcome you to today's program, The Power of Participation, Women Leading in NYSBA, graciously hosted and sponsored by Barclay Damon, LLP, and also sponsored by the Women in Law section, the Business Law section, and the Committee on Continuing Legal Education of the New York State Bar Association. Today's program will run from 5:30 to 6:30 for the panel portion, and for our in-person attendees, there is a reception immediately following the panel discussion from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. During today's program, for our online attendees, if you would like to pose a question to today's panel, please feel free to use the Q&A function in your Zoom portal, and we will address that towards the end of the discussion. And at this time, it is my pleasure to turn it over to the President of the New York State Bar Association, Domenick Napoletano, for some opening remarks. Domenick?
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's fireside chat with distinguished women and leaders of the New York State Bar Association. Women's History Month is dedicated, as you know, to reflecting on the often overlooked contributions of women in the United States. President Jimmy Carter in 1980 first established by proclamation Women's History Month, actually proclaimed it to be Women's History Week. And 6 years later, there was a petition to Congress to make it the entire month of March, and here we are. This year's theme is Moving Forward Together, Women Educating and Inspiring Generations. It recognizes the strength, quality, and influence of women who have dedicated their lives to both the education, mentorship, and leadership while shaping the minds of future generations. Our panelists today embodies those qualities. I am proud that 3 of the New York State Bar Association officers are women, including 2 who have joined us today, while our third panelist is a past president of the association. Susan Harper is the New York State Bar Association's treasurer and the founding chair of Women in the Law section. She also served as chairperson of the Committee on Women in the Law. Susan focuses her solo practice on business advisory, financial services, senior fraud, and financial exploitation prevention. Taa Grays is the association's secretary and president-elect designee. Taa will be president in 2026. She co-chaired our strategic planning committee, our task force on racism and social equality in the law, our task force on racial injustice and police reform. Taa recently served as vice president and associate general counsel of information governance at MetLife Legal Affairs. As the head of information governance, she was responsible for the strategic management of MetLife's global information governance program. Past President Sherry Levin Wallach served as the association's president from 2022 to 2023. She is the deputy director of legal services in Westchester County. Sherry is also a member of the New York Chief Administrative Judge Advisory Committee on Artificial Intelligence in New York courts. That's a mouthful. Her practice is focused on criminal defense, although she has also practiced medical malpractice defense, plaintiff personal injury, and estate planning. I am looking forward to their comments and unique insight on the path that women leaders in the New York State Bar Association, their journey to the leadership roles that they have achieved, and for future women as well. These stories are critical, especially at a time when the percentage of women leaders has grown over the past decade from 36% in 2014 to 41.2% in 2024. However, these hurdles remain challenging nonetheless. Although 50.3% of law firm associates are women, there are often more male lawyers in the country, and men usually have a greater percentage in the upper echelon of our legal professions, such as federal judges, state Supreme Court judges, and law firm partnerships. These obstacles and strategies need to be overcome, and I hope that we can share some insight today on how that can be done. I'd like to begin the discussion this afternoon by asking each of our panelists the following question. Would you please provide more information on your background and specifically what motivated you to join the New York State Bar Association and perhaps other professional organizations? And has your participation in those organizations, as well as NYSBA, meant to you professionally and personally? Whomever wishes to take the question first. Sherry?
Sure. I'm happy to start. So, hi, everybody. Welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for being here, both, virtually and here in the room. Great to see you all. And as I commented earlier, I'd love to see everybody sitting like toward the front of the room. That's wonderful, because it means we want to be engaged. So to answer Dominick's question, when I started my practice, went from Hofstra Law to the Bronx DA's office. I went as an assistant district attorney. And within a year of being, not even, less than a year of being in the Bronx DA's office, there were a number of assistant DAs, including leadership in the DA's office. And I might footnote that by saying, if you notice, Darcel, our current Bronx DA, is still very involved in Bar Association work and always present. And she was a supervisor when I joined the office. But anyhow, when I was in that office, I was encouraged to get involved with the New York State Bar Association, both there and in law school. So I know, the times have changed and so forth, but between the two, I was a student member and then encouraged to get involved. There was an ADA who I worked with who was very involved with the association who brought me into the ranks. So I joined the Young Lawyers section. And at the time I became a district rep from the 13th district, which is the 13th district. No, the 12th. The 13th is Staten Island, the 12th, which is the Bronx. And anyhow, I became a Bronx representative, a district representative, and then went on to be a district representative, and then immediately became engaged, right? I loved the Young Lawyers section. I love mentoring. I love learning. I love meeting people. It was so exciting to me. And I think for any new lawyer, even today, I think it's so exciting to meet those people that you see on, so to speak, TV, or you see on Instagram, you see on Twitter, you hear about, you go through law school reading decisions written by the people that you then develop relationships with in the bar. And so I'll get back to that in a moment, but that largely inspired me. Then I was asked to be a member of the membership committee of the New York State Bar as a young lawyer. And that was kind of it. I took the path from there. So I went through the ranks, chaired the Young Lawyers section, chaired the Criminal Justice section, did all the officer positions along the way, and have been intricately involved in a lot of what we're dealing with today. And it's really exciting to see your work over years come to fruition when you work with a bar association for that many years. And you're that engaged in the leadership roles. That's the rewarding part to me, largely about being involved with leadership. It's a combination of the networking and relationships that you build. Obviously, when I was in my own practice, and I was for 17 years, also the referral opportunities, which are huge, and the engagement that you have with colleagues. And then, of course, the policy and legislative changes that you were part of. So I'm going to go back to that real quick and then turn it over to my panelists. But I just want to say, because it's really interesting, I was on the phone today with somebody talking about what's going on with discovery in criminal justice, right? And this, the impetus, or the movement for rollback of discovery reform. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I'm not going to get into the politics of it. I just want to say that through the New York State Bar Association, from the time I was a young lawyer, I've been involved with this. I've been working on discovery reform. I've been involved with writing the bill that was ultimately taken forth by the committee and adopted in some form, and then taken to the legislature and adopted. Same thing with Raise the Age. I was involved with that from very early days of it when Judith Kaye, who remembers Judge Kaye in this room? Come on, anybody? Oh my gosh, wear your red shoes every day, okay? I do. But she was our first female chief judge of this state, one of my mentors, one of the most amazing women I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And she was a staunch believer in a lot of things, but largely Raise the Age in the youth courts. And so these are things that you get to do. So I developed relationships with her, got to work with her, and others now who serve on the courts, various courts, the appellate divisions, the Court of Appeals, and my colleagues who are partners in major law firms. We all started at the beginning of this. And so, when you start to have these conversations later on, and to answer your question, and I could go on and on, obviously, but this is the excitement of it all, right? And so taking these leadership roles and engaging yourself, you develop relationships that not only make you, I think, a fuller and wholer attorney, but you help to make the practice of law and the legal profession better. and you develop amazing friends, okay, who you have for your life. And so before, just earlier, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan, we were sitting there saying, like, the three of us have known each other, what, 20 plus years at this point, probably, I don't know. But we've been engaged with the bar, and that's how we've become friends. And you really have an amazing system of not only support, but legal colleagues that will help you throughout your career and help develop the future of the profession. Susan.
So, thank you, and welcome for those who just joined us now. So I got involved I first started getting involved actually with the New York County Lawyers Association, okay? And I was involved with their securities committee as well as their women's rights committee. And at the same time, being a financial services attorney, I happened to be just checking out the different programs that were happening, and I saw this program, securities arbitration, all-day program at the New York State Bar. And so I went to the program, and some of you may know Steve Younger. He's a past president. He was then the co-chair of this committee. He's very charismatic, and I got to meet everybody. And this was a really exciting moment for me, okay, because I really opened up a lot of doors for me. I was accepted right away. I got to meet certain major clients, and that was very exciting. This was an entree into them. And so that was exciting. But at NYSBA, I was very involved with this women's rights, organization. But NYSBA is a 501c3, and so they don't have the lobbying capability. At the same time, too, when we were talking about other associations, I was heavily involved with another association called the Financial Women's Association of New York, where I ultimately became the general counsel, and I became president of that group too. And here you were trying to change a system, within the Wall Street world. And again, not a lobbying group or anything like that. And I would sit back sometimes and I would look at the New York State Bar and I'd say, wow, they get a lot of things done. As Sherry just mentioned, all this policy stuff. It's like, they have this whole group behind them, this government affairs group, and they were really dynamic. And so somehow or another, I got Steve to appoint me to the Committee on Women and Law, and I got on the subcommittee, and I met this dynamic leader, and her name was Taa. And Taa says, "Who are you, and how did you get on?" Because I self-appointed myself to the subcommittee, the legislative subcommittee, because I was so eager. I really wanted to do this. I wanted to be the person to write these legislative memos, and I would stay up on the weekends, and I would say to my family, "Oh, I'm busy doing something," while I was sitting there writing these memos. And Laura knows this about me already on the Women in Law section. And so through that's how I got very involved with the State Bar. And of course, we heard some of the other positions that I got involved with. We can hear more about that shortly. But, there's an enormous amount of opportunity for you, okay? And you just got to seize that opportunity that's in front of you. And the one thing that is wonderful about the State Bar too is, as I would say, I was moving up to different roles, I'd reach out to people. I'd say, how do I do this? How can I move ahead in this role? And there are lots of people that are very willing, to when you pick up the phone and call them, they'll say, okay, this is what you need to do, and there are things that you need to do as the nominating committee, and there are things that you need to do beyond the nominating committee that you may need to do to further, yourself. But there's an enormous amount of opportunity, and we'll talk about that more shortly.
So passing the baton to me.
Yes.
I want to start off with a quotation. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. It's an African proverb. And that's what the power is of being a part of an association, not just the State Bar, but any association. And you get career development, and there's also a personal aspect. And I think those things both of my co-panelists have echoed. When you're a part of, whether it's the State Bar, which of course, we've all done a lot of work, and we'll talk more about that later, but there are other bar associations, affinity bars. It's a place where you go to for resources, right? How do you get information and advice about how do you develop your career? A network isn't just some place that you go to pull information out. It's a place where you go and you enrich it, and it enriches you back. And that's what you see in the State Bar and other bar associations of which we've been a part of. It's also a place where you can help make things better, right? And from the comments you've heard from both of my co-panelists, we're all inspired and motivated to do that, right? We stand on the shoulders of many great women, I mean, Judge Kay being one of them, but many great people who participated in this, not just for their own personal benefit and networking, but because they wanted to make things better. We want to help each other. The legal community is about relationships, right? I mean, a lot of what you two talked about is our relationships, right? The people that you've met along the way, right? Relationships that you reestablish. Where did I see Sherry after I left the DA's office? In the state bar. I'm like, hey, what have you been up to? And then yes, that
They don't
started.
know we were in the DA's office together.
Well, now we do. And then when the advocacy piece, she was so excited. I'm like, oh, okay, Susan, if you want to do that. And then we actually were able to move forward with the
pay equity.
pay equity.
We did the pay equity.
Yeah,
Right.
because there wasn't that advocacy piece.
Right.
And that goes back, I mean, Sherry and I worked in the DA's office 20 plus years ago before we even involved in the state bar, at least I was involved. And then, you know, Susan and I got to know each other shortly after that. And it's the relationships that you make that help you not only in good times, but also in challenging times, right? So that's really just summarizing what my other co-panelists said and what Dominic kind of intimated to as well. This is a place where you find your home, right? You find your legal home, you find your people, and it helps you to not only do things now, but to be able to do things for the future.
Sherry's point about Judge Kay, I have to digress. I don't know how many of you ladies recall that Judge Kay had an affinity for red shoes. And so one year, when Sherry was secretary of the association, at a dinner that we had that we used to call these downstate caucus, Sherry said, you know what, as an homage to Judge Kay who had passed, we should all buy red sneakers, men and women. And Sherry arranged for all of us to have red sneakers delivered to our offices, and we wore them at the executive committee meeting, I think it was, right?
House delegates, yeah.
Right, in the House of Delegates, that we all had our red sneakers on, and I believe there was a photo of all of us in the Law Journal
There was,
as an homage to Judge Kay. So
there
that being
was.
said,
And those, and then I ordered so many of those Converse,
Right.
they were red Converse, that I mistakenly ordered some to my home and we were in the city. So they ended up getting donated to my kids' school for like,
it's true, it's true. So, ladies, there are various practical aspects of being part of an association such as this. So it would be helpful to the audience, I believe, if you would explain to them what those obstacles are and what the benefits are as well. So Taa, would you first give us an overview of the NYSBA organizational structure? This is within your go-to, so.
Yes, it is. So thank you very much, Ernesto. So first click, please. The New York State Bar Association, like many other bar associations, are membership driven, right? It's a professional organization where we come together for the various reasons that we've talked about. The power of what we do is derived from the membership. Next clip, please. However, in order to run the organization, you can't have 50,000 plus people making decisions. So the members select individuals who run the organization from a day-to-day basis to make decisions. So our House of Delegates manages the affairs of the organization, supervises committees and task force, and also is the policymaking body. Next clip, please. Now, some of these responsibilities, right, managing the affairs, supervising the sub-entities, the House of Delegates only meets 4 times a year. So in between times, one of the committees of the board, our executive committee, they meet and then they decide how to manage the organization as delegated responsibilities from the board. Next clip, please. Thank you. There, in addition to this is governance, right? Making sure that the ship runs, making sure funds are allocated, making sure that the committees have the resources that they need, that things are able to run so resources like programs can be done. But who actually does some of the legwork around that? Sections, So we have 28 sections that are based on practice areas as well as demographics. Sherry made reference to one of the sections that she's a part of, criminal justice. And then we also have demographic, which is women in the law. So those are just two examples, but we have several sections that are places where you find your more specific home, right? Your people and your practice group. Next click. Then we have committees. There are approximately 47 committees, of which the executive committee is one, and nominating, which Sherry will talk about a little bit later. And this is related to the internal work of the organization, right? The House of Delegates can't be involved in every single detail, right? So again, you have work that's delegated to other entities where they're members, just like all of you and all of us here, who help to get things done. So when we need to have officers and people who are going to be responsible for managing the organization, you have the nominating committee that does that. We have an audit committee, right? We have to make sure that our books are aligned and that we're following our financial procedures. But we also have other committees like the Committee on Women in the Law. It actually started off as a committee that was related to a special topic or a specific topic. And then the last click, please. In addition to these two types of sub-entities, we also have task force. The president will create these task force to focus on a topic that doesn't always fit neatly into a section or to a committee. And so it brings people together from across these different areas and maybe even members who aren't a part of sections and committees to come together to talk about and research and come up with ways that the state bar can be impactful in a particular area. For example, Domenick, one of his task forces is to look at the opiate crisis. And he has a crackerjack team of folks who are looking at how the state bar can influence policy and coming up with ways that the association and our members can help address some of the really entrenched and intractable issues dealing with the opiate crisis. So now I'm gonna turn it back to Dom, who will turn it.
Hold on, Susan. So Susan, could you please give us an explanation of the roles that one can play in the association?
And Ernesto, can you bring back the slide, please?
Ernesto, go back to the slide. Sure. So first, I'm going to talk about just committees. As Taa has mentioned, that there's different committees, and I know that there's a family law committee, even though there's a family law section too. I never understood that why, but okay, it's a family law committee, family law section. There's animals in the law. There's lots of different types of committees, okay? And in order to get onto a committee, the president has to appoint you to the committee, okay? And then there's usually a nominating group on a committee, so that way, you know, in order to become chair. And usually there's a rotation on and off the committees each year. So unlike a section, we wanted to get involved with the section. A section, of course, are larger. To me, when I looked at the sections, they're almost like an association within an association. Okay, they're very large, some of these, and they can be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 up individuals who are members. Leadership works in a way whereby each section has bylaws that you can just look up online. And the bylaws usually spell out like the sort of leadership path. So let's say for a women in law section, we don't have a specific path whereby, let's say you're the first vice president, the second vice president, the first vice president, and then you become the president-elect, the chair-elect, and then the chair. We basically, you know, you're raising your hand like the year before to become the chair-elect. And if you want to become the chair-elect, then the next year, then you're automatically the chair, okay? But other sections work very differently. They work where there's a very clear pathway and they would, you know, the way that you would move up. And then, you know, with respect to the officers, I want to talk about task force too, because I think task force, you know, you have an enormous amount of opportunity for leadership on task force too. I was the co-chair and then chair of the task force on the future of the profession, legal profession post-pandemic. So that was a huge task force and a lot of work looking at all the different issues, looking from surveys of how everybody is feeling towards virtual work and live work, as well as all different sorts of other areas. So you have that as well as potential opportunities. And the president puts together these task force. You could always approach the president. And I'm sure they're more than happy to have a chair or somebody to raise their hand to run these task force, right? And then, of course, then there's the executive committee and officers. I'll leave that for Sherry. You could talk about that because it's more of her area in the nominating committee. But for the sections too, there's usually a nominating committee as well. So you want to seek out that person to let you know and be mindful of the dates too. There are specific dates and bylaws in the sections that say that you have to raise your hand or submit. It's probably less formal than it is on the officer level and the executive committee level. But please be mindful if there are certain criteria that you're supposed to submit what they're requesting. Because they've taken their time out to think about what they want, what they're going to be looking for. I think it's important to ask past chairs, ask past leaders, what sort of time commitment, what would be expected of me. Of course, you're going to want to be involved with the group, that, the committee or the section, to observe and see what's going on, and where I'd also encourage you is to also be a chair of a subcommittee or be a chair of a committee. So as I mentioned, when I first joined the Women in Law Committee, I was involved with the subcommittee. I was just a member. That's all I wanted to be. I didn't want to run the show. I was very busy at the Financial Women's Association running the show.
That
over
came
there.
later.
Right. But then eventually, then I chaired the subcommittee. Then eventually I chaired, the committee. Right. And so it was gradual over time. And you have to do what's best within your time frame too. You may have other commitments, like you may have family commitments, beyond work and stuff, that you have to make sure this works for you. So I'm gonna let
Before
Yeah.
April 1st, want to talk about that deadline?
April 1st for. Oh, okay, I didn't realize that. So, April 1st, the president appoints by April 1st, right, for the committee. So it's very important that you raise your hand beforehand to let the president know if you're interested in a particular committee. Thank you. I forgot about that April 1st deadline.
So, so I get to talk about the next phase, but before I do, I just want to mention one thing. So, Susan mentioned the Committee on Family Law section and Committee on Family Law. It's the Committee on Children in the Law, Families and Children in the Law, I should say. And the reason that was created is because the Family Law section is largely focused on matrimonial and that type of work. And Committee on Children in the Law is really focused on the issues that children face when interacting with the family court system. So, Article 10s and CPS and representation, which is a big issue. And a lot of what you're hearing in today's world about budget, if you're following what's going on, I'm obsessed with the budget because I'm a nonprofit attorney. But if you're following what's going on and where the money is being allocated, one of the things the chief judge is asking for is more money for family court. Committee on Children and Families in Law focuses more on family court issues, as opposed to matrimonial, which is supreme. But that said, little law lesson there, but and so oftentimes we have committees that are created to kind of supplement, if you will, right? So for example, you have the criminal justice section, and most of us and many of us are largely involved with the rights of individuals as well as just defending them and prosecuting them and judging them, because we have all three in there. But you also have the civil rights committee, right? And the Committee on Civil Rights focuses directly on things that impact civil rights, right? But sometimes there's an overlap, right? So I just wanted to give that. So now I'll take I speak to nominating committee and kind of the process, if you will, to become an officer. And I would say this, what Susan said is absolutely right. Take an opportunity if you can. If there's something that interests you or that you're particularly passionate about, go to the president-elect designee, president-elect who's not here, but she's very approachable, Kathleen Sweet. She's from Erie County, and mention it to them. I will mention to you that by the time somebody's in the president-elect position, they already pretty much have decided what it is their mission's going to be, because you have to start preparing, right? But when you're a president-elect designee or you're starting to run for president, you're an officer of the association, those are great opportunities for people to come and say, hey, this is something that matters to me. And I'll give you a perfect example. When I was president-elect of the association, so I'd already decided on my task forces, and some people would say I had too many. I have a lot of things I care about. But that said, a lot of good work got done. But somebody came to me and I'd already decided, and they said, what about anti-Semitism and basically anti-Semitism and anti-Asian issues that are going on? I said, that's amazing. That's really important. And I'm Jewish. That was super important to me, right? My president-elect, also somebody who was interested in those. So I said, you know what, why don't you talk to the president-elect about that? Because, and this is just a member of the association. He happens to be the incoming president of the Westchester County Bar, but at the time he wasn't. And he came and I said, why don't we talk to the president-elect? And we did. And my president-elect, Dick Lewis, we thought it was something he cared deeply about. And he also, having been, he's Jewish and being very involved in the issues, he created the task force on anti-Semitism and anti-Asian hate, right? And that was a really important task force during that time frame with the war that still is going on in Ukraine. It started before I was president. But the point I'm trying to say is that was an idea brought by a member, right? Not even somebody who was in a leadership position to somebody in a leadership position. And he ends up being a co-chair of that task force, right? So it's a good example of how you can take something that means something to you and turn it into a leadership position in the New York State Bar Association, right? So that's one way to do it. The other way is, as Susan mentioned, through committees, right? Because you can be involved in a section and say, hey, I care a lot about this issue. Let's form a committee about it. And the sections often will say, yeah, you know what, this is important. We'll form a committee. And then you see where that goes. So what happens next, right? So now let's say you're involved in this, and let's say now you've been chairing a section, and as Susan mentioned, to become chair of a section, it's an internal section process. So you join a section, you get involved, maybe you get a position as a committee chair on their executive committee. Each section is slightly different. So some sections have all their committee chairs on the executive committee, others don't, but you're in a leadership position in a section. And then let's say you decide, I really care about this issue. This is an area that I practice in. I want to follow that leadership track in that section. That's one way to go. You can be a leader of a section. The other way to go is you can, as Susan mentioned, become offered to chair a committee. Oftentimes the president or president-elect will come to you, especially if it's something that you're passionate about and you've written on and spoken on, and ask you to do that, right? So then you can come in that regard, or through a task force. But there's another way you can come into leadership of the New York State Bar, and that's through leadership of a local bar, affinity bar, any of those, right? So as Taa mentions, right, you have a lot of affinity bars in the state. There are a lot of local bars in the state, and in particular, there are county bars. And our county bars have positions that they put forth. They're the ones who choose, for example, who the members of the executive committee are going to be from the various districts. The vice presidents are elected through the county bars. One of the things that we hold very near and dear in the New York State Bar Association is representation from all around the state in our leadership. And so that's super important, but that's a way to come as well. So let's say you're involved in your county bar and you want to get involved in the state bar. That's another great way to do it. Ultimately, you end up deciding you want to take an elected position. There are certain positions that are elected. There is a member at large position for the executive committee, which you have to put in a paperwork and put in your resume and letters of recommendation and whatnot to the nominating committee and get nominated to those positions. There's also diversity seats on the executive committee that are decided through the nominating committee or appointed by the president, depending. But these are ways that you can get before the nominating committee, or you can get before the nominating committee as as an officer candidate. But before you get there, you need to do all these other things, right? Because I shouldn't say you need to. There are plenty of people who've come and had leadership roles in county bars and then used those as a platform. And that's worked really well. And we've had presidents who were president of a county bar, not an officer of this association, who became president. The other path is to go through the officer track, right? So you become a leader in the state bar, the sections or the task forces, then you become an officer, and then you run for a president position. Those positions, the officers' positions, the president position, are decided by our nominating committee. And our nominating committee is made up of representatives from all around the state. And again, our nominating committee, the representatives of the nominating committee, most of them are appointed through the county bars. Okay, with the exception of the at-large positions, which are often past presidents, and then of course, current president and president-elect. And we also have a tradition. So I'll be chair of the nominating committee next year, I believe. So you're past president, and then the following year you become chair of the nominating committee. So, but this is a way to get yourself in front of the nominating committee. The first time I went to the nominating committee, I went for a member at large position. Okay. I did that for 4 years. Then I was appointed through my county as vice president from the 9th Judicial District for a couple of years. And then I ran for secretary. I've been before the nominating committee, like, I want to say like 10 times or something like that, a lot of times. But the first time I walked into this room, I was like, because it's 40 people from all around the state, many of whom are highly, like most of highly respected, you know, lawyers, judges, whatever. And you walk into this room and you're like, hi, how you doing? It's pretty intimidating, I have to say, the first couple times you go before it, because it's not something that you necessarily understand or expect, but it's great because remember, there are people in that room who you know, there are a lot of people who at that point you're gonna know.
Yeah.
And there are people who you're gonna look at and you're gonna see, like, you know, they say like, I mean, I'm a litigator, you do a lot of public speaking, like they tell you all different tricks for like not being nervous, right? One of the things I like to do is when I'm in a room like that, I look at people that I know and I talk to them because I feel comfortable talking to them because I know them. And if I look at them and I'm talking to them, and then I can easily move to the people I don't know, right? So these are some things, but anyhow, the nominating committee is where you present yourself for these various positions. And it's wonderful experience. I will say this, be prepared, okay? And I'll say this because we're women and women in the law and it's fact. Women, you've got to be better and more prepared. End of story, sorry, that's the case. So just do it. But be prepared and go in there and put your best self forth and explain all the things that make you the reason why you should be a leader. And trust me when I tell you, and I've been on the nominating committee as well as before the nominating committee, that everybody there wants the best thing for the association, the people who are the most interested and most dedicated. So if you go in there and you can show that, and you're passionate and you have important things to say and you care about the issues and you understand the issues, you're gonna get the position. I mean, it's just a matter of that's what it is. So there's a lot of opportunity. I could go on and on about this, but we don't have a lot of time. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Tom.
The intimidating factor that Sherry just spoke of, I recall very distinctly when I went first time before the nominating committee, when I ran for treasurer. The room itself had to have been 5 times as long as this room. And I needed a pair of binoculars to see who was in the room. So ladies, once again, as all journeys, you know, attaining the roles that you've attained in the association, they come with certain challenges, certain obstacles. Sherry, would you please share your advice to the ladies that are here and that are with us virtually, how they can advance themselves? You've spoken to that, but give them some real meat and potatoes on what they can do to really achieve, you know, not only in NYSBA, but also in their careers as lawyers.
Absolutely. So I would say a couple of things. One, always find great mentors and you will, okay? Because you're here, you're participating in this and that's a way to do it. The people that have mentored me through my journey within the Bar Association and my career, and most of that has been simultaneous, because when you get involved with the Bar Association, it's like this amazing path that you're on, and you can help navigate your career and find and meet the people that are in the area that you want to practice. And I will tell you, for example, my current position as Deputy Executive Director of Legal Aid Society of Westchester County. I got that position largely because of my work with the Bar Association. Really? Yeah, you want to know how? Because I was in private practice and the current executive director knew me from the work I did on the Committee on Mandated Representation and the committee and the criminal justice section. And she had been watching me and all the things I had been doing. And we were introduced by a judge of a good friend of ours, who's now our DA, and in Westchester County. And I'm looking at Judge Coverdale, who's here with us today because she used to work in our office. She's now a judge in Mount Vernon and she knows this story very, very well. But, and literally, my now boss came to me and said, I want you to come work with me. I just need to wait until I have, because it's a nonprofit, right, the position for you. And 2 years, and she kept coming back to me and kept coming back to me. And, you know, eventually I ended up in my position, but it was largely because of the work. So mentoring, right, and engagement is so important. But the other thing that I want to say is take your time. And especially I've mentored So I'm an obsessive mentor. I think we all are. Mentor, yes, mentor. We all are. I love to mentor people. I find it so incredibly rewarding and it's paying it forward, right? But I will say this, that I've told so many women, don't, like, you want to have a family or something happens in your life, like that you're changing your job or whatever it is, and you think, I can't do bar association anymore, I don't have that time. The answer is not that you can't do it. It's that maybe you can't do it as much as you want to at that moment in time. And there are leaders in this association who I've mentored into that, who were like, let's say, having a child, and they decided, I need to step back, I shouldn't take that leadership role. And I said, wait a minute, don't say you shouldn't take it or you can't take it, just say you're not ready for it now. And that happened to me too in various times along the path where I made decisions about that. So what I want to say and where I want to stop on this topic right now is, don't ever let yourself think that you don't have the time, because it's a matter of how much time you want to give. And in any good volunteer organization, we're not a mandatory bar, right? It's about what you put forth and the quality of what you put forth when you can put it forth and keeping those relationships. So let's say there's a couple of years where you just don't have the time, you're a new associate or, you know, a new judge or whatever it is, and you have a lot of work on your plate and you just don't think you can do it. So just stay involved, go to the programs, come to the galas, do the things, be seen, keep those relationships. So when that time comes in your career where you have a little space and you want to get involved, all you have to do is pick up the phone or send an email.
I agree. That's a very good point. I think being seen is very important. And it's as, like I mentioned before, when I got involved with the Committee on Women in Law, I said, I don't want to be involved in running this. I just wanted to be involved in writing like these memos, that's all I wanted to be involved with. I was very focused and laser focused, and I wanted to really learn that skill set. That was important to me. But as Sherry mentioned, another interesting point is that you never know who's really watching, right? That's really what it is. People are always observing you in, you know, your volunteer position and in your regular everyday life position. And, you know, you get a lot of particular potential opportunity, as Sherry has mentioned, you know, during these events. I remember just, you know, with the state bar, I remember I mentioned the story about being part of that securities committee. Well, the next year, you know, I was very lucky. I got to be on the panel. Well, because of that panel, I, you know, landed a really major financial institution. And that was really, I was just starting out, like, as, you know, as an attorney back then. So that was a really big deal. And so, you know, you never know who's really watching. And I think that that's always important to put your best, you know, foot forward. Should I talk about gender dynamics just quickly too? Okay. Yeah, I wanted to just point out about the gender dynamics too. I said there was a question here that we had about just how does that play within, you know, leadership, within your leadership journey. And I have to say, Sherry had mentioned, and we've all mentioned Judge Kay. Judge Kay was a big influence on all of our lives. Judge Kay, as well as people such as Judge Ellerin and Kay Crawford Murray and others, they would show up. They would be there. They're here like how we're trying to be here too. And at our Women in Law annual meeting that would happen in January, we'd have, you know, we always have this luncheon. And I just remember walking into this luncheon, and I just remember, like, you know, I was like a nobody, and I would see these women, and I'm like, oh my God, these people are like the people in the whole, right? And I couldn't even believe it that I got to sit there and break bread with them. I mean, that's how exciting it was. I remember, tell you, when she was chair of the committee, getting up there and talking, I'm like, oh my God, who's that, right? And it was just so exciting. But, you know, it's important for us to have role models, and it's important for us to push ourselves too, to become that role model when we're ready, when the time is ready for us, right? So I think that's, and the other thing that's important too is the allies that we have. The male allies at the state bar have been really important to us, okay? So Domenick in his whole work, you know, some of you may be aware or not aware, like we had this presidential summit, and I, you know, chaired this program on conflict-related sexual violence, very big topic, heavy-duty topic, international topic that Domenick was, you know, very supportive of. And we've had other leaders, Michael Miller, Hank Greenberg, past chairs, who have been, you know, supporters of the Women in Law section and Women in Law. And we can just go back and beyond and beyond and beyond, right? So we, I think, are at a very historic time at the State Bar, because the fact that right now we have Taa as the secretary, myself as the treasurer, and Kathleen as the president-elect. And it's, you know, that's a very historic time. For some of you may not be aware, and because Hank Greenberg is like the historian for the New York State Bar. Of course, he said to me, "Do you realize that you're only the third woman in almost the 150-year history of the State Bar?" I said, "No, I didn't know that until after I got the position. Probably would have been totally
treasurer.
overwhelmed, you know, to be treasurer. And so my point is, it's important, you know, for us to show up, and as we progress along in our career, to help lift people up too. So that way, you know, when someone else walks in the room, you know, and, you know, they're starting out their law career, that they're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe who's here," right? That we're here and supporting each other.
So Taa, what do you think needs to change in the New York State Bar Association and the legal profession to support the next generation of women leaders?
As I was thinking about this, I said, I'm gonna ask AI. I'm gonna see what they say about this issue. Artificial intelligence, specifically, I use Perplexity. And there were 4 things that it outlined. I'm not gonna go into the details, I'm just gonna give you the headlines. And then I'm gonna give you what's wrong with where we are today in the legal profession. So first it said leadership and promotion disparity, work-life balance challenges, gender bias and discrimination, retention issues. So as I read the little blurbs, and I thought about it, and I said, you know what? The legal profession is structured for and by men. That's really what the main problem is, right? You wouldn't have gender bias issues, you wouldn't have retention issues, work-life balance challenges, or leadership and promotion disparities if the legal profession had been developed by both men and women, right? It's designed where a man who has a wife takes care of the children, right? And he can work as many hours as he needs to or wants to. And as far as promotion, they all know each other. They go to the clubs together, they golf, they do this, they do that. And they're also willing to give chances where women feel like, or there's pressure where we have to be able to do every single thing. Men, I can do 6 of those 15 things. I think I can do that job. Right? The profession was designed by men, but we're at a moment, as Susan was saying, historic for many, many reasons. But we are at a pivot point. And where the State Bar can be influential is some of the things that we talked about. It's that networking, right? That we come to this place as a home, as a place of strength, to be able to work together, to be able to make changes. We have resources to be able to do that. And we've had some task force and we've had sections and committees that have been looking at some of these issues. And, which is one of the reasons Susan came to the State Bar, it's around advocacy. How can we come together in a section, in a committee, to be able to come up with ways that we as a State Bar can advocate for this and get other stakeholders or other people who are similarly interested in the things that we believe to be important for an inclusive legal profession to be able to work together to do that.
Thank you, Taa. So ladies, we have a few minutes left. I have just one question remaining. So if you can perhaps give me a quick sentence or two. Reflecting on your individual journeys, what would you consider to be the crowning achievement, and especially in your leadership position, and in the legal community as a whole? Sherry, what would you say would be the crowning achievement of your career?
So I would say that it's interesting. So to me, it's a crowning achievement. I mean, being president of the New York State Bar, come on, right? Like, honestly, I remember the day when I was at the Marriott Marquis where we originally had our annual meeting back when. I remember running up the escalator after Ken Standard, one of our former presidents, and being like, Mr. Standard, hello, I'm Sherry Levin Wallach. I was like, he was like, you know, this untouchable figure, the president of the New York State Bar. And I actually told that story, I think, in my nominating committee interview, because it's a true story. And to me, that was like something that was so incredible. So now to think that I've attained that is really just so incredibly rewarding. But it also opens up doors and opportunities along the way. And those of us that aspire to be leaders and in that type of leadership role, you're the kind of person I know who can't say no or doesn't say no, and also really loves being involved, right? So that's been extreme. That has been such an incredible, opportunity for me. But leading up to it, I was able to really do what I loved, which is mentor, teach trial academy for the New York State Bar Association, which was my baby with my colleague Tucker Stancliffe, was one of my most rewarding experiences, 15 years of this amazing program teaching lawyers how to be trial lawyers and advocates. But that gave me this platform. And now, after being president of the New York State Bar, I get these wonderful opportunities, like Domenick mentioned, being on the committee for the chief administrative judge of AI in New York State courts. And I was just appointed by our chief judge to co-chair the committee on the future of the New York bar exam, right? So these are really exciting and thrilling things. And you get to work with these people that you walked into the room at one point in your career and went, wow. I'm going to end with this story because I think it's really an important one and something, really interesting to say. One of the most rewarding things about all of this to me and most exciting things has been that you get to know people. I've known some of the judges who are sitting on the Court of Appeals since before they were judges, let alone Court of Appeals judges, or before they were on the court, and similar to the appellate divisions. But what's exciting about this, and even some of our Supreme Court justices of the United States, when you read these decisions after you actually know the people and you hear their voices in your brain, and some of our retired judges, and I read these decisions, it gives a new dynamic to the law because you hear them saying it. And so that's something that's also just, I can't say enough about, and I'll pass it with that.
I'm very proud of all the different activities that I've been involved with whichever association I've been involved with. At the state bar, I don't think there's just one, there's just so many. And I think at each level, as I mentioned to you, there's a contribution that I'm just, that I'm very proud of. But I definitely think that, our challenge of and our solution of moving away from just the Committee on Women in Law to opening up to the section. So just to give you a little, just background on that. The way that it works, of course, is that the president normally appoints, people to the committee. But what I started noticing was that people did not want to rotate off the committee, right? I didn't personally, as the leader of the committee, want to lose those people because they were amazing and they were very dedicated. And so I really saw that there was a high demand to be part of this group. And so at the time then, in converting the section, it wasn't an easy task to convert to a section. I just want to point this out to you. Okay, you had to write this whole letter. Sherry was there when I made the presentation.
I remember I was like, just move for a section, just make the motion.
That's right. I had to drive 3.5 hours to make a presentation up in Cooperstown. I mean, it was a whole big to do. It really was. But what has made me so happy about that is the opportunities that it's opened up for so many women, okay? And what I'm proud about is to see all of the women who have become leaders in this association. And it's like Sherry has mentioned, when you see someone who first is starting off as a member, I've had leaders say to me like, oh, I can't really run anything. Then all of a sudden they became like that leader and they're running fine. And I'm like, what are they saying? They're amazing. And their contributions to the section have been incredible. So I really love seeing that. I love also spotting talent, and then I like seeing and developing talent and encouraging talent. To me, that's really important. So and then of course, the work as treasurer of the association. I mean, it's been very important work. This is a very pivotal time in the association as we've changed our membership model. We've done our building stuff. This is not all exciting and sexy stuff, but still, you're there. and you have a seat at the table and you're part of that. And as Dominic knows, as being treasurer, it's not just only just looking at bills coming in, bills coming out. You're dealing with millions and millions of dollars, not just, a $20 million budget. You're dealing with, right now our investments, over $60 million. So I mean, it's a lot of stuff that you're dealing with. And so I'm very proud to be part of that team of people.
Okay,
So I am just standing between us and you and a reception, and I know, Dom, you need to go.
it's okay.
At this point in my leadership journey, I would say the crowning achievement is that I'm going to be the first person of color to be president of the state bar. Woman. As far as also advice, I think that was another part of the question. And this harkens back to what I was saying about the legal profession being structured by men. Women have a tendency to want to be perfect, right? And part of the way society kind of trains us, right, and encourages you to be is perfect. I had a boss who also was a mentor to me who said, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? You have to know when you need to be top, right? But then also when is okay just enough? We see a lot of men where okay is just enough, right? And then they're fine, right? And we have to be confident that when we bring, sometimes you need to bring your A game, but sometimes you're like, you know what? The B game works just as well, right? Because it's about managing your time, managing your effort, and understanding where does it make the best sense, right? And sometimes you have to understand that considering some of the challenges that we talked about. But I think women tend to want to be able to tick every single box, like with job description. They did studies on this, right? So it's just understanding when does it make sense for things to be a certain way versus when you need to bring just enough to the table. And that changes through time. And I think if women know that earlier in their careers, then as ChatGPT talked about, retention issues, right? Despite equal representation in law school admissions, many women leave the profession due to burnout, lack of mentorship, and hostile work environments, right? That burnout is probably because we're working, right? And you gotta work. It's a demanding profession, but you don't always need to be running on 1,000 cylinders, right? And you gotta be able to know how to judge that. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and get involved. We want you. If you're not already involved, please join us. If you are involved, there's a time to kick up your game and do some more work. Let us know. Tom.
Ladies, I gotta tell you, I am honored, and I mean that sincerely, to have been here with you, to have learned from you. And I want to thank our speakers, please, for their insight. Everyone else, please hang around. I know we don't have time now for questions and answers, but please engage our panelists with your questions during the reception. Stay and mingle and network and do all of the things that these very talented ladies told you that needs to be done. And thank you again for coming. Thank you so much.
And I just want to say, I want to say thank you to Barclay Damon, Karen Brown. Thank you for hosting us. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your support. We appreciate the support of all of our members and your organizations. As a person in the Women in Law section, we hope that you'll talk to some of our members and see what we're doing and get involved with our section or any of the sections of NYSBA. So thanks very much again.
Thank you.